Here we are in the office of Dr. Tapan Pathak at University of California, Merced. Dr. Pathak, would you give us a little idea about what you do here?
I'm Dr. Tapan Pathak. I'm a cooperative extension specialist working on agriculture and applied climate science and agriculture with the UC Division of Ag and Natural Resources, as well as with University of California in Merced. So by training, I'm an agricultural engineer, and I have background in both ag engineering as well as applied climate science. And a lot of projects I do here, they are related to how we can better utilize climate and weather information and put them in a more decision support perspective, so that growers can use that information to make agriculture more resilient to climate risks. So just to give a very big picture overview of what climate change is doing in this area, and what are the implications of climate change on agriculture. So just to start with, when we think about temperatures, as we know with climate change, we are going to see gradual increase in the temperature. We know that average temperatures are increasing, but when we think about valley, and when we think about the changes in the temperature, rate of minimum temperature increases is substantially higher than the maximum temperature increases. And so if we think about San Joaquin region, the maximum temperatures are increasing at a very insignificant rate, but when we think about the minimum temperatures, they are increasing at a very substantially higher rate. And that is true almost everywhere in California. So different microclimate regions in California has different rates of increase, but overall minimum temperatures are increasing at quite higher rate than the maximum temperatures. And when we think about precipitation, so historical as well as projections in the future, we are not seeing any particular trend in the precipitation, but what we see is a lot of variability. And so in the historical as well as in the projected context, there is a large amount of variability and then no trend. So what does it tell us is basically we are going to be vulnerable to both flood as well as drought conditions in California. So if we divide our temperature and precipitation records over last 50 to 100 years, most of our categories are in dry hot or dry cold. Yeah, I have to repeat. So the most of the temperature and precipitation are either in the dry hot category or wet hot category. And so on average, the years are getting hotter and hotter than normal, but we are still in the dry and wet categories. And so if we think about last 15 years, 8 or 9 out of those 15 years are in dry and hot category. And so we had this exceptional drought in California, and then that populated a lot of dry and hot category in this region. Snowpack is our natural water storage, and as we know, in the Sierras, the snowpack is shrinking substantially. And if you think about the projections in the future, by 2080 or so, we are going to see almost 30% or 35% reduction in the snowpack. There is another report by Department of Water Resources in California that suggested by 2050 we might expect 25% reduction in the snowpack. And so that water is going to be a crucial factor. And apart from temperature, precipitation, and snowpack, when we think about extremes, so the heat waves, for example, we are going to see more intense and frequent heat waves in this region. And so if you just give an example of Merced, so if we think about 100 degrees threshold for this region, in the historical context, if we were getting like 4 or 5 days with temperature exceeding 100 degrees, in the future projections, that number could be about 40 days, where we have temperature exceeding that threshold. And so it's not just about the number of days that we are getting this more intense and frequent days, but also the distribution. So most of those heat or hot days, or heat waves, they were populated from, let's say, May through August, somewhere around that time frame. But if you think about the future, we might start getting those heat waves as soon as April, and it can extend all the way to October. So when we think about ag labor productivity or health implications, there is going to be a huge impact. So these are the changes that are going to be more relevant to the valley. And so when we think about implications of those changes on agriculture, the first and foremost important thing is that temperature increases is going to impact on yield. And then so there are multiple model projections that are showing that we are going to expect significant less yield for various crops depending on which model they use. But in general, we are going to expect reduction in the yield. Now, I mentioned about a rate of increase in the minimum temperature. One of the implications of that is a lot of the tree crops, they do require a certain amount of chill accumulations, chill hours, during their winter time frame for their dormancy period. With this increases in the minimum temperatures, we are going to see less and less chill accumulations, and so if we think about those crops that do require high chill hours or high chill requirements, those are going to be more vulnerable to future risks, future climate risks. And there are certain papers that are published in the past which talked about from the historical perspective what were the chill accumulations, and in the future projections. We might expect to see 30 to 40% reduction in the amount of chill that we get in this region. So as we know that CO2 concentration is increasing, and then when you think about agriculture, with this increases in the CO2 concentration, there are certain types of crops that do benefit from this increase in the concentration of CO2. However, we are also seeing this increase in the temperatures, and so when you have higher temperature, higher CO2 concentration, it also requires more water. So the plants do require more water. So what happens when you don't have enough water in agriculture, it creates this water stress, and if that water stress is hitting some of those critical growth stages, for example corn, and soybean or any other staple crops that we talk about, if this water stress is hitting during the critical growth stages, it's going to impact on yield significantly, irrespective whether you are a certain type of crop that favors higher CO2 concentration in the atmosphere.